good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever that you are streaming from. This is the East, Central, and South Africa Excel community group. Brought to you by Chris Excel Training and Consulting. We are corporate and individual trainers and also consultants. And these are our partners in Kenya and outside Kenya. A minute, I admit you. So today I'm excited to have William back. William was the first presenter of this series of webinars, and somehow he is a co-founder and also an inspirer and mentor for this group. It was part of his brainchild. So William is a Power BI trainer. Areas of expertise is data visualization, Google Sheets, analyst, and corporate trainer. William is also an author. He has written a book on Excel dashboards. He has a portfolio of Excel courses. You can get his book on Amazon. You can also check his courses. Very interesting YouTube channel. I think you should all go there and subscribe. Follow him on LinkedIn. He has good content. For the topic of today, we are going to look at developing Excel dashboards, tips and tricks. So, welcome, William.
Thank you very much, Crispo, and the team that is on board for having me today. I'm excited to be back. I'm not sure how many of the attendees were there last time, but all in all, we are happy to have every one of you to the session and the introduction that has been done by Crispo. I don't want to go back to that, but he's right that we had a session regarding pivot tables. You can check it out from his YouTube channel so that you're able to maybe familiarize yourself with the things we looked at. Probably towards the end of the session, Crispo can show the video so that you know where to go. So I'll be your facilitator for the next 1 hour. Please, Crispo, you know this session is running up to 6, right?
Yes, we can go up to 6 if you want us to go up to 6.
Today is a heavy dose, so we shall be running for the next hopefully 1 hour and 15 minutes, a marathon of some sort. Like Crispo says, the intention is to be able to create a dashboard in Excel. But as we do that, we shall be looking at how you can also clean up your data in Power Query, some bit of pivot. And we are excited to have you here. You can reserve the questions towards the end, but you can drop them in the chat. I'll also be looking at the chat as we go along. So I'll present going forward, and then let's see which screen should I. Okay. So please let me know if you can see my screen, and you can do a thumbs up in case you're able to. Crispo, on their behalf, you can also confirm that what you're seeing is dashboard project.
Yes, that's what we are seeing, dashboard project.
Okay, great. So we shall be looking at how you can connect to data. For this session, we have 2 years of data. So we shall be looking at how we structure this data, which is having the 12 months from January to December for 2023. And we have some extra worksheets here, sheet 1 and sheet 2. They have different objects. And then in March, this one has been formatted as a special table compared to the other worksheets which are not yet formatted. So one of the tasks that we need to accomplish is to combine January all the way to December into one table. Apart from that, we are gonna also look at this data that is for year 2024. The data is in one worksheet, but it has more or less the same columns, but instead of the periods going through the rows, then you have the multiple columns, as you can see here on the screen. So the whole idea is to combine the 2024 data with 2023 and then be able to analyze as one set of data. Ultimately, at the end of the day, as you can see here, the data runs up to August 2024. But later on, we shall see if we add a month, will it also pick as part of the process? So that's what we're going to be looking at today, how we combine those two tables. And that is what is summarized in this screenshot or the PowerPoint, as you see there. So we have the 2 years and the requirements that are needed for the two files. I think we shall be sharing these ones after the session, just in case you want to follow along and review what we did. So for now, we're going to be starting with a clean Excel file that is going to help us. I've minimized the ribbon so that I have a lot of the real estate work with, but when it comes to data consolidation, nowadays we talk about Power Query because we also have Power BI, which leverages the same technology. So for us to access Power Query, we usually get it from the data tab, and this one is Excel 2016 and upwards. That's where you go, data tab, and then you'll see get data, and then you choose which source of data you want to connect to. In our case, it's an Excel workbook, so I'll go ahead and select that one. Then it will process and ask us to navigate to where the files are. So in my case, I have these two files. So I'll pick 2024, the one that runs up to August. I select and then I click import down here. Then it will make the connection to the file and give me a preview, a screen for me to preview the multiple sheets that could be there in the file. But in this case, we only have one worksheet. So I'll select the worksheet here. And then down here on the screen, you have transform. You can either load or load to. In our case, we don't want to load. When you click load, you mean your data is cleaned up and it doesn't need any further adjustment. In our case, that's not the case. We need to do some cleanup. That's why we need to click transform data. When you click transform data, usually this is what you get, and this is a new screen. It's called Power Query Editor. You can see on the top left of your screen, that's why it's written Power Query Editor. On the left side, you see the name of the table. In this case, it's sheet 1 because the worksheet was called sheet 1. And you can see on the right, the right side of the of the screen, you have the steps that we're gonna be applying. In our case, we only have the source step, which is basically giving us the connection that we have chosen where the file sits, and then navigation in this specific item that we have navigated to. So in this case, we need to reorganize this data. First of all, whenever you're cleaning up your data, you have to be intimate with it. You have to understand how is it structured, what do you need to do It is not cast on stone what you have to do, and therefore it's in our case, if you look at this, we have the columns that you see on the left side. We call them anchor columns. And then you have your data set that has the sales amount from January all the way to August 2024. So we need to reorganize this. First of all, we'd want to eliminate this first row, which has nothing. It's completely empty, and it's not unusual to you, for you to have some jump rows just above where your data starts. So for me to eliminate that first row in Excel, Power Query, and even Power BI, there's no right click on the row so that you're able to delete as normal Excel. So in this case, we go to the Home tab, you will see an option to remove rows, and then you choose what is the basis of you removing the rows. In my case, I want to remove from the top of the screen. So I click top rows and then choose how many rows do I want to eliminate. Is simply one row, and I press OK. So you notice that first row disappears, and then you're able to have your headers occupy the first row all the way. So in that case, it means therefore I can promote the first row to be the proper header because every data set is needed to have the proper headers. So you can do the same. If you look at where I'm pointing at, this table icon just next to the first column, then you choose use first row as headers, or alternatively, you can go to transform tab and you choose use first row as headers on the ribbon. So when I click that, you can see it promotes the headers, and all the way you have the proper headers for this data set. Every step that we're going to be doing here is going to be registered on the right side of the screen. Now, the next thing we want to do here is to reorganize this data so that this data from January all the way to August occupy two columns. And this is very important because you realize if you retain the data in this structure and probably you want to create a pivot table, this one will require you to drag and drop like 12 times in case you have 12 months of data for you to simply create a monthly report. But the optimal structure of data is to have this one occupy two columns. One column will have the month or the period, and the next column will have the figures, which is the amounts. So in our case, we're going to highlight these anchor columns. So from the first column to the last column, which is the item description. Okay, so you select those as the anchor columns. Then you can click from the transform tab, you click pivot columns. You have these options which are there, and pivot columns and pivot other columns or only selected columns. So in this case, we'll click and pivot other columns because we want, when we say unpivot, remember in Excel when you do pivot tables, you're trying to put things on the rows and on the columns, and that is the action that we say you're pivoting. So in this case, we are doing the opposite from this tabular data layout. Then we have the unpivoted, the columnar. So we'll end up with many rows. So in this case, we right click also, we can get the same options, then unpivot other columns. Whatever is not selected is what we are calling other columns. So in that case, you'll get two columns on the far right. The anchor columns do not get changed, but they get repeated as many columns as you had. If you had 8 and they all had data, then the rows will be selected with 8 rows. Sorry, the columns, the 8 columns will now become 8 rows, and therefore you'll have many rows at the end of the day. So you have the attribute and you have the value column, which has the amounts. Anything that was empty usually gets eliminated by doing that step. So this attribute column, and it will always be attribute and value. You can always rename. In this case, we just call it period. And then the next one will be amount. Just a second. So we have the period and the amount. The next thing we needed to do is to have the, remember our end goal. Let me just see if we can bring up the PowerPoint again so that you understand where we headed. This, what you see on the screen, is what we want to achieve at the end of the day from the data. So you have the customer, region, these are the anchor columns. Then from the item description, we are gonna be extracting the brand. Then we have the period and the amount. Now for the brand column, we are told this comes from the item description, which is the first characters before the first space in this column E in this screen. Now the period will be a date. As much as we have the months and the year, we're gonna convert that to a date. Let me go back to this Power Query screen. So here we have Jan, and it has some form of formatting. You have the space and a pipe symbol in between. So we're gonna be replacing this one. So I'll be in that column, go to transform tab, then you have the option to replace values. You can also do the same from the home tab. You click replace values. What are we gonna be replacing is the space that comes before the pipe symbol, the vertical text between the month and the year. So I press the space bar once and then put the pipe symbol and press the space bar again. And then I will replace with a hyphen. In this case, I'm using a hyphen because if you look at the bottom right of my computer, the dates are formatted with a hyphen. If yours is a slash, I would advise you use a slash for that. So if I click OK, then you have Jan-2024. And then once we change the data type for this one, it will automatically convert it to a date. If you want, you can put a prefix for this one, just to be sure it will convert. You can come to the transform tab, format, and then you add a prefix. The prefix is some text that comes just before the text. So it will be one hyphen, just in case we want to default everything to the first of the month, the first day of the month. So one hyphen becomes the prefix for that. Now, the next thing, from this item column, any text that comes before this first space, in this case, Huggies, like that. If you look at Molfit, any text that comes before the space is the brand for this particular item that we are looking at. So we need that as an additional column, and therefore we need to extract the text that comes before the space, the first space. You can do using split column, but let me go with the add column tab. Then we choose to extract. What do we want to extract? We want to extract the first characters, sorry, not first characters, but text that comes before a delimiter. So in this case, text before delimiter. The delimiter is a space bar, so I'll press the space bar once on my keyboard. And when I say OK, you get a new column on the far right, which is basically giving us the brand. Now I could go ahead and rename it from here by double clicking the header. But since in Power Query we say best practice is to try and reduce the number of steps you're doing, I can edit directly here on the formula bar. So this red part is what the new column is being called. So in this case, I just call it brand. I can edit directly there, so it doesn't come as a new step. So you have this one, and on the left side, you have the table name, which is sheet 1. Let me go ahead and double click to rename this one to FY24. Okay. So this will be our data for 2024. And finally, for this table, we're going to probably change the data types here. So I'll press Control A to select all the columns. I'll go to Transform tab. You have the option to detect the data types here. So if I click, you can see it changes the data type. You may not tell automatically, but if I go just a step before that step, the data type is usually denoted by this. Next to the column header, you'll see ABC123, ABC123 for each of the columns. It just means it doesn't know how to treat it. Is it a text or is it a number? For the amount, you can see for the brand, it was able to detect it's a text because it is hard-coded by Pacori automatically. But now if I go to the place where we have the change data type, you can see all the columns that are text have ABC. The period, because it's a date, gives us a calendar. An amount, because it's a decimal, it gives us a 1.2. Now, if you want to check what the icons are, you can click on any of the columns. You can see what they mean. So you don't have to cram, but you can see where what the icons represent. Now, for this period, we want to default it to the end of the month. I know previously I used a prefix of 1 hyphen so that it defaults the first of the month. So I couldn't have said, let's say 30th or 31st because the months have different end of the month. So in this case, we have period. So we go to Transform tab. On the right side, you'll see this calendar icon. It has the date. You can use it to extract the different attributes of the date. But in this case, we're going to choose month and choose the option that says end of month. You can retain it as first of month. I prefer end of month. And therefore, every date in that column will be changed to the end of the month. So that marks the end of the data cleanup for this particular table for FY24. Now we have 2023, which I illustrated previously. So I'll go back to the Home tab. I don't have to close Power Query for me to again connect to the new data set. So I'll go to the Home tab. On the far right, it says New Source. Again, the same option you saw from the Data tab in normal Excel. I choose Excel Workbook. Then it will ask me to navigate to where that file is. Sorry, it looks like my screen disappeared. Just a second, I just trace it where it is. Okay, sure, here it is. So this is the screen you get for you to navigate to that particular file. In our case, it's FY23. And then again, I click import just like previously. So in this case, this one had many files, many worksheets, so it may not, and you can see you also have tables. Usually, if it is a declared or an official Excel table, it has a bluish border on top of the icon here. But if it's a normal worksheet, usually it will be denoted by these icons you see here against the months. But the tables which have a blue border on top, those are special tables in Excel. The one down here, the last one here with a bluish element inside, it's a named range. So you have to be aware whenever you're connecting to your data set. Are you dealing with a special table? Is it a normal worksheet? Is it a named range? So you need to be aware of that. In this case, you can click this option that says select multiple items, and then you choose the different worksheets that you want to connect to. So we can go ahead and select the 12 of them. But in that case, it means in Power Query, you'll have 12 tables for you to clean up and then join them together into one table. So you can go ahead and do that. And in fact, I will illustrate with January, February, and March so that you get to understand what I mean. So if I take Feb, Jan, and March, just the first quarter of 2023, and I press OK, as you see on the left side of my screen, I get the three tables, Jan, Feb, and March. Let me rearrange them like that. So you see they are in the same structure as I illustrated at the beginning. But again, we have a problem because we need to eliminate two rows so that we can get the header and then promote the header. This one comes with an units column and then the amount, and it is consistently the case even for the rest of these tables. You can see it's the same structure. So then the question begs is, do we clean the 12 tables, the 12 monthly tables, or is there a better way to do the same so that you don't have to be repetitive in what you're doing? In fact, it probably would have been easier to then copy paste it in Excel so that you have one table, or you use a formula like VStack for you to combine them. So for the sake of this lesson, I'm going to show you, in case you have three tables and you want to combine them once you clean up, how do we go about it if we only have Jan, Feb, and March? So I'll clean up this first table, which is January. So in this case, again, we go to Home tab, remove rows. How many rows from the top? So we're removing two of them because that's row 1 and 2. They are just informational. And then once we get the first row to be the headers, I can go ahead from the Transform tab and I say use first row as headers. Therefore, I get this table with the proper headers. If I don't want to keep the units column, I can go ahead, right click and choose remove. Then just like before, we had the item description. I want a new column that gives me the brand. So I can go to the add column tab and then choose to extract the text that comes before the first space. So in my case, text before delimiter. And then we choose which delimiter. You press the space bar once, press OK, you get a new column towards the end. This part we've done before in the FY24. So this one will be our brand, the brand. And just like before, we can go ahead and do detect data type for each of these columns so that we apply. Now, if we do it like this, then it means I also have to go to add column tab and define for which period this data is. So in this case, I would do custom column and then I say the period will be maybe 1-Jan because we are dealing with 2023, and this needs to be in double quotes because it's a text. So you'll have to do that, and therefore at the point where you come and detect data types, then it will be able to convert the proper data types. So the steps which I've applied to this table will be repeated again for these other tables. I wish I was editing these so that I just, fast track the video, but in this case, I'll have to repeat the same thing. So I'll do it quite fast so that we see what we are talking about. It's good to appreciate why we need to do the other way, where we don't have to repeat the same thing every time. The steps don't have to follow each other so long as you're able to do it and end up with the same output. Okay, and then the period, just like before, custom column. Sorry, let me do it from the last step. Custom column, this one will be the period. And again, therefore, this one will be 1st of Feb, because we are dealing with Feb 2023, and you simply press OK. So you do the same for March. I don't want to repeat that one. In fact, let me just go ahead and delete. Sorry, just let me maintain it there. But basically, the same steps will be repeated 12 times. So that's why we are saying, is there a more efficient way? But in case you do it the layman's way, the way we've just done here, then you'll go to Home tab and choose to combine this data set by using append queries. In this case, we can use append queries as new because you want a new table at the end of the day. Then it will ask you to choose which tables do you want to combine. In this case, Jan and Feb is what is cleaned up. But in case you have 12 of them, you'll have to choose this option that says 3 or more tables, and then you move them to the right as need be. By double clicking, it will move to the right. You can also remove it by X. This option on the right here that says X, it will remove. Okay, so in our case, it's just Jan and Feb. If I click OK, then you'll have your append one as the new table, and you can confirm the period column has, if I click load more, you have both Feb and Jan. And therefore, if you had 12 worksheets, they will all be put in one table. So that would be the first approach. But now, since the process looks repetitive, then the question is, can we take one of the tables that we have used and then convert the steps that we've done to a function that can be used to, be replicated for all the 12 worksheets. So in my case, let me go ahead and right-click the January one. I will duplicate, and then I will rename it to maybe FX data cleanup. You can call it anything you want. But this table, so this is now the advanced way of looking at it, but then it is more streamlined. So the whole idea is, you can see, if I look at the steps on the right side, if I go to the navigation here, in the source tab, you have all the tables that are coming from that Excel file. Then the next step, which is called navigation, we chose one specific table. And that specific table is what then we apply the rest of the steps. So that at this source step, then we can say, if this is our table, the data column, usually if I just click on the side there, you can preview the text or the data that is inside that particular row in this data column. So if I give this Power Query a list of tables, I can then tell it to look through and conduct the steps that we have just done for each of the 12 worksheets. So in my case, for me to convert what we've just done to a function, we are going to go to the View tab and open the Advanced Editor. Now, this Advanced Editor can be scary. Let me warn you. I'm also not a friend to the Power Query editor unless I have to do something that is unavoidable. In this case, I'll put an allowance just before the word let. I will not edit what is below that. Then I need to give it a variable, which I need to put in those opening and closing parentheses. So this one, I'll say I need an input table as a table, because we are supplying a table to the function. So that's what we are putting there as a variable. And then we follow that with an equals sign with a greater than sign. They say the combination of the two is called a go-to operator. So in that case, that's how you do it. Now, if you look at the steps here, this is exactly what we did. But up to step 2, this is the navigation. Then step 3 is where we start working on the data inside the specific worksheet. Step 2 is the specific worksheet that we navigated to, and therefore step 3 is the steps that you need to do for that specific worksheet. It therefore means if I eliminate these 2 steps, because we are converting it to a function, and this function we shall not be asking it to go to, you know, your PC or computer and then navigate to a file. So I can remove these first two steps, I delete them. And then on the next step, I need to use this variable or parameter inside these steps. So in this case, it's required in this step where it says table.skip on which table. So the table is the input. So I'll remove what is written there as January sheet and type input table. You can see it actually appears, and then I select that. When I click done, you'll notice what you are seeing before is different from what we are seeing now. So all the steps have been lumped up into one, and therefore this one is asking for you to, you know, define an input table, then it can run the steps for us. So I'll go ahead again, and for this match table, let me delete the step that says navigation on the right so that we have the list of tables. And this one I will call it list of 2024 FY24 tables. That's the name of the table. So it will have the list of the worksheets. But now, before we apply the function, we need to make sure that the tables we supply follow a similar structure. In this case, I need to filter. I can use the item column and then uncheck whatever I don't want to be included. So I just pick the 12 months of data, Jan to December, and then I press OK. You can see these are 12 rows. Each one of them is a table, as you can see down there. This is a preview of what is in Feb. This is a preview of what is in October. So I need to supply a function that will work on this column called data. So in that case, if I go to add column tab and I click, I want to create a new column that will clean up the data. I click custom column. So this one, I don't have to give it a better name than custom. If anything, we shall be discarding it, but you can rename. So the function, we called it FX data cleanup. As I type, it will give you the IntelliSense and you can see the selection. That's the function. In brackets, we give it an input table. That's the parameter. In our case, the tables are in this column called data. So this, I'll just double click from the right side and then I close my bracket like that. So when I press OK, we shall get a new column added here on the right side. But now it has the same elements with what we have in the data column. But now if you look at the last column, which we've just given it, you can see the difference between that and this is that this one is not cleaned up. This one is clean. If I pick at random and I go to September, you can see this one again is cleaned up, but this one is not. Now the challenge, I think we copied the function, but then it had a step that was adding the period. In my case, I would want to have the period come from this column. So I'll have to go and append the function, update the function a bit. I want to remove this step that added the period. Sorry for that. This was meant to be deleted. I will remove that. And then for this, usually it commits the last step so that I have to remove this part and use the last step. Sorry for that. So that if I go back to this one again, you can see it will not come with that new column in the cleaned up table. Sorry for that confusion, but basically we would want to have this item, or we can use the name column to build up the period. So I'll select the item, hold Control and click the custom. Right click on the header of any selection. I choose remove other columns so that I have this item. I can rename it to period. And this one, because it's FY24, we can add from the transform tab a prefix and a suffix. So from the transform tab, you have format, then you add prefix. The prefix will be 1 hyphen. Again, I said that depends on your computer. You can use a slash 1 to default it to the beginning of the month, but we're gonna change in a second. Then again, from the same place, transform format, we add a suffix. So this one will be hyphen 2024 because we wanted the year. Then at this point, we can change. If I click on the header where it's written ABC, I can force this one to be a date now. So it will give me this period as first of every month. And again, just like before, we can go to transform tab and make this one from the date calendar month. We choose end of month so that it comes with that. Now, we have 12 months. We want to combine them into one. So this column has two-sided arrows. So this is what you use to expand the content within the different tables. Remember, it's gonna work so long as the source tables had the same column headers. And that is what was the case in our scenario here. So I just select all the columns and I press OK. Then we'll end up with our combined data without having to clean one by one. If I click the period column, you'll see all the months of data are provided. And in this case, I can go ahead and Control A. From the transform tab, I detect data type. So this one has FY24. Sorry, was it 2024 or 2023? Sorry for that. I thought I would get a prompt to correct me, but it's FY23. So I need to go back to this step that says added a suffix so that I correct that to be 2023. Sorry for that. So that will flow downstream so that we have 2023 data. Even the name of the table needs to change. I can just call it FY23 to be short. Let me move this one down with FY24. So you end up with a clean table of FY23, which has 8 columns. You can see on the bottom left of the screen, 8 columns, and they are the same columns you see in FY24. And therefore, we are able to append the two into one table, which will be used for pivots or using sum ifs or other formulas. You can combine the tables. So if I come to home, I want to append as a new query. Append queries as new. We only have 2 tables in this case, FY23 and FY24. Fine, we go ahead and press OK. So we have our sales data. Let me just go ahead and rename it there. And this table is basically what we need for a report. So we have the cleaned data. Once we clean everything that we needed, we can go to Home tab, close and load. You have 2 options. Close and load basically will take all the tables that you see here and create a worksheet for each in Excel. That is the first option. But close and load too allows you to select where your clean data will go. And this is the option that we need because we don't need to load Jan, Feb, Append 1, FY23, FY24. Those ones are part of the process, but they are not needed for the report. So I'll choose the second option, close and load to. You can see by default it's a table, and that's what I was just mentioning a second ago. But I want to choose only create connection so that it first allows me to close the Power Query editor, press OK. So on the right side, it will show you the list of tables that you have worked with. But basically, the only one we want is sales data. The sales data, if I right click, it gives me the option to choose again, load to, in case then I want to change where this needs to go. So if I choose table, let me just do it for the sake, but we shall update in a second. If I choose table, you get your table, the sales data loaded here in this worksheet. Okay, so this table, you can use sum ifs or any other sort of formulas for you to, to analyze this information. But in our case, for this presentation, we wanted to use Power Pivot, and therefore I didn't want to have the data loaded back to Excel. The Excel will only have the report. So I'll go back again to this table called sales data on the right side of the screen. I right click, choose again load to, the same option. And then instead of table, I will choose again only create connection. But then down here where it says add this data to the data model, that is what will send our data to the data model. So I need to tick that one so that the data model in this case is Power Pivot. I press OK. So it will give me this warning because I had already loaded this table to the Excel worksheet and probably somebody has used it. In this case, nobody. So it's just a check. In our case, we can just ignore. So the data will be removed completely from this worksheet. Okay. And down here, it tells you 70,000 rows were loaded, but then you can't see the data. It was loaded in the data model, which is the Power Pivot. Now, in case you don't have Power Pivot on the ribbon, like in my case, you need to go to File, then you go to Options. On these options, you go to Add-ins, and down here where it says Manage, you choose COM, C-O-M, COM Add-ins. When you press Go, it will allow you to, tick Power Pivot for Excel, and then it will appear as part of your menu or the ribbon. In my case, I don't need to do that. I can just cancel. Now, for me to see the data, I go to the Power Pivot and I click Manage this ribbon. I click Manage. As I told you, this will be a marathon, but you can rewatch after this. But this is where you see the data. Usually, you can't delete a row like you can do in Excel, but you can add new columns. It's more or less a read only. So in this case, this is the data that you can work with. And in case you have any question, like we said, you can always put it on the chat. Then at the end of the session, we will discuss. We shall see what you're asking. So this one, you can apply the formatting just like normal Excel. This is what you have. Now, in our case, we want to create a calendar. So the same process would be applicable if you're using Power BI. All what we've done so far would be applicable. But since we're going to be doing a dashboard at the end of the day, I hope we're going to be covering a good chunk of it. Let me present my screen, again, my PowerPoint. Let me look for my PowerPoint. So far, we've been able to clean up the data. And what we've been able is to explore the possibilities of Power Query. We now want to do Power Pivot. We've done the 2 bullets of showing the basic approach and then the advanced where we use a function. But then this sketch here is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. So we shall have a dashboard that has this kind of a look and feel. Usually when you're creating a dashboard, always start with a sketch, whether you do it on paper like me, or you use AI, or you use any other tool. So long as you have a sketch, it will give you a guideline on how you want to approach the report. Again, it assumes that you've already had a chat with the consumers of the report to understand what is important to them. So as you can see here, we'll have the actuals and we'll have the YTD. Now you can still use formulas in Excel to create YTD, but today we're gonna touch on 2 DAX formulas or 3. So let me go to Power Pivot You've seen our end goal is to come up with something similar to what we have there. So now the engine that will allow us to do that is Power Pivot. So the concepts will be the same or similar to what we covered previously with the other session that we had. So you can revisit it. Crispo will share that at the end. But with Power Pivot, basically it's called Power because it gives you more capacity compared with the normal pivot tables. One of the things it allows you to do is to create a formula that is reusable. For instance, if you want to create a YTD kind of a calculation, you can use Power Pivot. Again, it also allows you to analyze multiple tables. In our case, also create relationships. So I want to create a calendar table out of this, basically to give me the year and the month for the sake of the report. The YTD is what we call time intelligence calculations. And in that case, it just implies, it works best whenever you have a calendar. And that's the reason why we need to create a calendar. The good thing is that Power Pivot allows us to do that straight off this data that we have here. It will scan this table for a column that has a date, and then it will see what is the earliest date, what is the maximum date. It will create a calendar that spans and covers the two dates. So I'll go to Design tab here on the ribbon. You'll see this option that says Date Table, and then I click New. When I click New, it will create a new table. You can see it's creating right now. So by default, it thought these are the columns that we need. Okay, you can delete them if you want. In our case, we just want the year, the month, and the month name. Probably I don't need the others for now, but you can leave them there. Let me go to the Home tab, apply the short date format to this one. For the month name, I want to edit. You can see on the formula bar, it changes. It gives you the option to edit the formula. In this case, I don't want the entire month name. I just want the first three letters. So I'll delete 1M so that it's 3M in the formula bar. So when I enter, I get this month. Now, for these others, the day of the week, I can delete them by right-clicking and choosing to delete the column. Alternatively, if I right-click, I can say hide from client tool. Any column that you feel should not be seen from the report side, you can hide in this case, or you delete all the same. So we're just gonna retain those three columns, the year, month, and the date. Then on the ribbon, from the Home tab on the ribbon, towards the right side, you have the data view, you have the diagram view. So the diagram view is where you create relationship. If you've used Excel, you'll know you'll end up doing a lot of VLOOKUPs in case you have some dimensions that you need to use for your report. In this case, it allows us to simply drag and drop the common field. In the calendar, it's called a date. In the sales data, it's called a period. So you can simply drag and place it on top. So the common fields, you can see I'm holding left mouse button on my keyboard, with my mouse, and then I drop it on top of the date. So it will create a line that tells us the relationship. One means one date, and the asterisk, the star that you see towards the sales data side, it means one date in the calendar appears multiple times in the sales data. And the arrow here that points towards the sales data, it simply implies the calendar can be used to filter the sales data in our report. But the sales data, I cannot use the regions column to filter the calendar backwards. That's what the arrow means there. So I need to click again the data view from the Home tab towards the right data view so that I can see the data. And then the next thing you're gonna learn today, if I'm on the sales table, I want to create a few measures. A measure is simply an aggregation that you're doing on the data. Probably you want to know how many transactions are in my sales table. So you can count the number of rows. Maybe what is the average sales? You can do an average, you can do a sum, you can calculate the percentages. Those are what we are calling measures, simply aggregations that you do with your data. So I will start typing, and usually this lower side of the screen is called the calculation area. If you look at the home tab on the right side, you have calculation area highlighted as such. If I click, it will disappear. If I click again towards the right side, it comes back. So this is where you do your formulas. You can do them in any place. You start by the name of your measure. So you'll start by typing sales. As I type, pay attention to the formula bar because that's where it types. You don't see it down here. It types in the formula bar. So the name of the measure followed with a full colon. Some people tell me there's no full colon, it's simply a colon. Fine, followed with an equals, and then you tell us what is the function that you want to use. In our case, is a sum, and then you choose what do you want to sum. We are summing the amount column in the sales table, sales data table. Now, you notice when I start typing amount, it gives me amount, and then you have one that has the name of the table as part of what you see on the screen. Anytime you're referencing a column in your table, it is, you have to select the one that has the table name. That is the best practice. So you select the one that has sales data amount, because you could be having another table, maybe the budgets. You have an amount column there. So it may get confused. That's why you need to select the one that has the table name. Then you close the bracket like that. You simply press enter. That's when you will see the output down here. And you can apply the formatting here using the 1000 separator from the home tab. I click that one. And then reduce the number of decimals, maybe to 0. So that will be our sales. Okay. Now I want us to do another one that will give us the sales last year. LY for last year, full colon again, followed with an equals. I hope I can zoom the formula. Sure. So in this case, we want to get the sales measure, but subject it to a different context, which is the same period last year. So in this case, we need a function, and these ones we can always have a session later on to probably discuss at length. But the calculate function usually behaves, and I say this cautiously, it behaves in terms of the logic like a sum ifs function, because sum ifs, you give it the column that you want to sum, and then a set of conditions, which basically are the filters that needs to be applied. So the same case with the calculate function, it will ask you which measure or which expression do you want to compute. In my case, it's called sales, usually with those square brackets. Put a comma, and then what filter do you want to apply? In this case, and these are some of the functions that you will not find with the normal pivot tables. So there's a function called same period last year that will subject your calendar to shift backwards to get the dates which are equivalent to same period last year. So that if in your report you've selected, let's say, July 2024, same period last year will give us July 2023. So in this case, because these are time intelligence function, the same period last year, we'll give it the column with dates in our calendar. That one there, calendar date, that's all it requires. Then we'll close same period last year, and we close calculate. When you press enter, it will give you a number, but that number is meaningless until when you put it inside the pivot table. That's when it will make sense. So I'll do another one that therefore computes the growth rate between the sales and sales last year. So this one I'll call it sales Y on Y or year on year percent. And this one, again, it's full colon with an equals. We're gonna be dividing. What is our numerator? Usually you divide the current value with the last year value and then you deduct 1. So the numerator in this case will be sales. That's the measure. The denominator will be the sales last year. We close the bracket for divide, and outside the bracket we say -1. In normal case, we say get sales current year minus sales last year. Then you divide by sales last year. So when you open the brackets, that's when you get to do it the way we've done. Sales divided by last year sales -1. So this one needs to be formatted as a percentage. You can go ahead and probably leave it to 1 decimal place or 0 if you like. So we'll have a similar set, but now for YTD. Okay. See, my time is running, but let me just create them quickly. You can revisit later. So sales YTD.
Next said, William, don't rush.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sales YTD is the new measure that we're gonna create. Again, always with an column followed with an equal. So if you're doing it in Power BI, you don't need the column. Okay. So how do you get the YTD? There is a function again, and these functions just let me see if I can point you to where you, if it's your first time to interact with DAX. This language is called DAX. And most of the formulas, let me bring up the screen for you. So if you search something like total YTD DAX, the first link that you see there will lead you to see even the rest of the formulas, as you can see on the left side here. And there are quite many. The ones we are calling time intelligence functions, you will see the same period last year one down here. But for now, we are using the total YTD. And you can read what it has or what it requires for the syntax. It will ask for an expression, which is a base measure, and then the list of dates for it to use to tell where the YTD ends. These other arguments are optional, so we are going to simply specify the first two. So if I come back to this formula, sales YTD, so, and you see that's the beauty of Power Pivot. It's already pre-programmed. Instead of you having, to try an Excel formula that does the same, you can use these ones. So you have QTD, MTD, but you also have YTD. So the expression, what is asking you to define the expression, you can go ahead and say you're summing the amount just like we did before. But since we already have that, so we use the measure called sales. And that's why we say in Power BI and Power Pivot, the measures are reusable. Then the dates is simply the calendar date. This column called date. Just two arguments, you'll get used to them. Again, anytime I'm doing the formula, I'm going to the Home tab and applying the comma separator, and then reduce the decimals to 0. So this is one way to create the measures. Alternatively, if I go to the Excel, if I come back to this normal Excel view, home, insert, draw, page layout, I'm on the Power Pivot one. You can do it from here as well. When I say new measures, manage measures will edit the existing measures. So in this case, new measure. So here you choose where the measure will be stored. Is a sales data, that's fine. Then the name of the measure this one will be sales YTD, LY for last year. You can give a description there. But just like we did previously with the sales, so we are saying calculate. What do you, let me see if this one can zoom. It doesn't, oh, it does. It does zoom. So calculate, and I can use Shift Enter so that it is readable. What do you want to calculate? There's a measure called sales YTD now. So we are not subjecting sales now to YTD. It's YTD measure, then we shift it backwards. So sales YTD, put a comma. It will ask us to then define what is the filter. And the filter in this case is the same period last year function. And you will see a similar function called date add for those who are in SQL. Maybe it's a familiar function if you look at it from the same website, the Microsoft documentation. The date add allows you to do the same thing, same period last year, but this one is more powerful because it allows you to define, do you want to go back 1 year or 2 years? Or is it one, you want to go back 3 months? So it allows you that flexibility. So for the sake of variety, let me go with this one, date add. And you can see it will ask us for 3 items. The list of dates, because it's a time intelligence function. The number of intervals is whether you want to go -1, -2, and so forth. And then the interval is whether it's the month, the year, the quarter. They are all explained there. I'm just pointing you to the right direction. So in this case, date add, then it will ask for the date. Again, it's the calendar date, this one, comma, the number of intervals, I'm going back -1, and then the interval is a year. We want to go back 1 year. I close bracket for date add, and then I close the bracket for calculate. So here you can again apply the formatting just before you close. It's a number, 0 decimals. Okay. And you have the option to check the formula for errors. So this one has been validated. Fine. I just press OK. Then it will be added to the data model. So you can go ahead and do a new one there, or go back here. So you can see that it was added here, up here. I can cut and move it next to this one so that they are together. And then I do a similar one that will do the change, the percentage change using divide. So let me create sales YTD year-on-year %. Pay attention to the formula bar. Again, here you can use the normal division, maybe sales YTD, and sales YTD. You divide, you can do the normal division. Let me zoom the formula bar. The normal division like that, that's how we used to. Sales YTD, you divide by sales YTD last year, and then -1, which still works. There's no problem with this one, but in case it throws an error, in case last year is a 0, it will throw an error, and that's what you shall see in the report. And that's why we either wrap this one inside an if error, just like in Excel, we can say if error, and then the calculation as it were, comma. What do you want to return if it's an error? Let me just say open and close quotes to say nothing, or you could say blank. You can type the function called blank in case it's an error. It's still applicable. So if I enter, then I can format it as a percentage, maybe to 1 decimal. So we have the measures in place. Remember our end goal. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. So this is what we want to get. So we have a section that gives us the actual and another one that gives us the YTD. Then we'll have filters, in this case, slicers, year, month, and the brand. So we're gonna leverage what we've done so far. Let me sip some water. So these measures will be the basis of what we create as the report. Now, for you to create a report out of a Power Pivot, it basically limits you to use pivot tables. You can't use sum ifs here. But maybe if time allows us, we can see if we have a way to convert what we're gonna do into formulas. But for now, we are limited to using pivot tables. And they are available from the Home tab, still on the Power Pivot window. So this is where you have the pivot table, pivot chart, and the rest of these items there. Alternatively, I can close this window. If I just close this Power Pivot window, and come back to the normal Excel side. If I go to insert, let me close this pane on the right. It just basically, for those who just joined, is the list of Power Query tables that we have. Let me close it. Let me tidy this one a bit. So the insert tab, that's where you get the pivot tables. So you have this option to either click from table/range. That is the usual, in case your data was residing as a table here in a worksheet. You can do external in case maybe you're connecting to an SQL server or something. From data model, that is the one we're going to use today. And then from Power BI in case you want to connect to a published Power BI report. So in this case, let me go ahead and choose from data model. That is basically Power Pivot. And then it's prompting us to define where will that pivot table go. Is it an existing worksheet or is it a new worksheet? So let me go ahead and choose existing, and then I choose where I want that report to go. I press OK. So just like a normal Excel, you get on the right side your field pane, the pivot table field list. And the difference here is that you now are able to work with these two tables. So you have the sales table, you have the calendar, and then you have two options here, the all and the active. Active will list all the tables that probably you're using on this worksheet or this particular pivot table. All will have all the tables that probably you already have in your data model. Again, the screen on the right may not look like yours, but on this gear icon, usually by default, this is how it will look like. Okay, so you have the field, the tables on the upper side, and the 4 zones where you can drag and drop to create your pivot. So I prefer changing from the gear icon so that I have side by side, I have more feel of, let me minimize the ribbon. So to create our first pivot table, we want to create one that gives us the actual sales, which is basically the sales measure. We simply put a tick, okay? So we want the sales last year, and we want, so you see, and again, this is another advantage of Power Pivot. You can see the formatting comes applied because we applied the formatting when we were doing the measure. So if it was a normal pivot table, you'd have to go inside and do some tweaks to the number format. So those are the numbers that we have there. So you can go ahead and apply as many measures that, and as you can see, a measure is usually denoted with an FX on the right side of the screen. So you have the FX to tell you this one is a measure, not a normal field. Okay, so we'll have those three to be, and in fact, let me go ahead and do all of them, the YTD, that, and that. These numbers, as you know, again, I say they are meaningless until you put them into context. In our case, if you remember the screenshot or the sketch, we want the year as a slicer. So from here, the pivot tables will work the same way you have worked with pivot tables. And that's why I'm still referring to the previous lesson if you want to go full throttle with the pivot table. So let me go to the pivot table analyze, and then I choose to insert a slicer here. Then it will ask to define what is the basis of the slicer. In our case, it's from the calendar. I want the year. Okay. And then I think I also want the month. And what else did I want? I wanted the brand from the sales table. So if I press OK, you'll get the 3 slicers here. You can go ahead and, if I select 2024, you can see the number for 2024. This is the sales. Last year would be this one now. And then the change will be that there's a drop. Ideally, because here we are comparing the complete year for 2023, but this one is yet to be completed. And that would be the reason why you may want to apply the rest of the slices as we go along. Now, first, before we proceed, you can see by default, anytime you're working with Power Pivot or Power BI, usually everything sorts alphabetically. Okay. I'm not sure why it's repeating these ones as it is. Let me see, because they shouldn't be repeated, the months. Okay, fine. But to the point where these ones are sorted alphabetically, let's see how do we then have these ones sorted correctly. So I need to go back to the Power Pivot window, manage. I need to go to the calendar table. I select the month name here. And then on the home tab, you'll see sort by. And again, it's the same thing if you're doing the same in Power BI. Sort by column. What is the basis of sorting the month column? It's supposed to be sorted in the same order with the month number. And this usually applies when it is text. So when I press OK and I close this window, so you'll see now the months are sorted correctly. Okay. This one I would have to check why it's repeating these months. But ideally, if I right click this month, it should just show me one set of the months. If I right click the slicer and I choose slicer settings down here, I probably want to say do not show items with data, hide items with no data, because 2024 is selected, so probably it's giving me a set for 2023. If I say okay, apparently nothing changed. I would have to close and open and see if there's a problem with this, but no problem. For now, if I choose April, so you can see for April 2023, the value was 145,000. Sales last year for that was empty because we don't have 2022. And therefore, the change, we may need to update the calculation logic for the percentage change so that it probably, if you don't have the last year numbers, then it should be maybe blank or something. For YTD, means January all the way to April because I've selected April. So basically up to this point, I hope we are together. So we shall be using this worksheet here. Let me reduce this one. The worksheet here, let me call it calcs for calculations. Then we shall have our dashboard here as a new sheet. Okay. Don't mind, I intended to finish by 5:45. Hopefully I can manage. But let me take these slices, Control X to cut and move them to the dashboard because that's what, okay. This is where the people consuming the report will be interacting with. They will not be seeing what you're doing behind the scene. They will see what you have here. Let me quickly edit. From the ribbon, you will see slicer tab or ribbon because I've selected the slicer. So I want to change the number of columns for the year to 2, like that, so that it occupies less space. For the month, and you can resize them as need be. For the month, I want 12. So I'll make the number of columns 12 here on the ribbon. I hope you can see top right of the screen because I want 12 months. Again, somebody needs to investigate why it's giving me 24 instead of 12. Then I resize as need be until when I see up to December like that. Okay. So that is it. And then finally, I can also make this one 4 columns because it has 4 items. Okay. And then resize accordingly. So we have the 3 slicers. If you want to be exact, you can play around with this to just show it the way it should be. But yeah, you have the slicers there. Now remember, let me go back to my PowerPoint. We need these numbers to be shown. On the dashboard. Let me interchange. I'm used to the dashboard being on the left side of my, yeah, like that. So I need the numbers here for actual, and then YTD. So I'll go ahead and create, I can point to an Excel cell here, and I say I want this number here to be shown there. But then this column will keep resizing as the number grows. And that's why we don't do it like that. We usually go to Insert tab, look for shapes, and then choose the shape that you want to use. In this case, probably, let me go ahead and choose this one. You can format it as need be. Right click and format, apply on the right side the fill color that you prefer. Maybe a light shade of gray. You can play around with that. I don't want a line, so it will have a placeholder for my actuals. Now the actual numbers, we can go ahead and use other shapes. So I go to Insert tab, Shapes again. I click, maybe this time round, let me use a text box. So it will give me that text box. I make sure the cursor is not blinking inside the, you see, when I click inside, you can see the cursor is blinking. But for me to get the number, I just select the text box such that the cursor is not blinking inside. Then click inside the formula bar, I press equals, and now I can point it to this number. That is our sales. I press enter. Then that number there will not affect the cell, and I can make it bold in the formula home tab. I can change maybe the font. If you want, you can increase the font size and so forth. You can play around with what you see on the home tab. But again, so there is nothing cast on stone here. So there you go. That will be the number. And if I select maybe small fit, you can see the number will keep changing. Okay. It will keep changing as such. Okay. If I change the month, again, it will update accordingly. Fine. Let me work with 2024 because we need context for 2023 for us to track whether we are doing the right things. Let me change it to 2024, March. Can choose any other month. So this will be our value for sales. And for this, we don't want the text box to have the fill color and the border. So I can go to shape format on the ribbon. Where you have shape outline, you can choose no outline, and shape fill, you choose no fill, so that it blends with what you have there. So in a similar way, you can say, and let me actually move this one slightly towards the right side. So we can do another one or duplicate this one by pressing Control D. I want, to duplicate. Then on the formula bar, I will say equals, and then I paint last year number here to be whatever number it is. And then I press enter. Right now it doesn't have a figure. I would have to check why, because it should be having a figure. It should be having a figure. Oh, sorry, it's still in 2020. Fine. Why is it restoring? Let me clear the filter. 2024. Okay, something is not working the way I want it to work. But no harm, we shall check. Basically, that would be the number. Let me see, Pampas, that is okay. You know, it fails when you're already working on it. Let me see if I choose. Fine, let me work with this one. It looks like there's a problem as much as it's 22 rows. That sounds like a bug, but fine. So this will be June 2024 number versus June 2023, the 125. And I can apply using Format Painter. So that will be the number. And because this one is not the main number, we can reduce maybe the font and increase this one to be bigger. And this one maybe change its color, maybe to, I don't know, a different color that is not too conspicuous like that, but just play around with it. And then you have the change, which will be coming from this cell, the sales Y on Y %. And this one, we needed this one to be, conditional formatted. Now we can apply the formatting to this cell, okay? Or we can, we can apply the formatting to the cell. Alternatively, we can point to that cell and pick the number. I'm doing that because the pivot one, I'm not sure it will sustain the conditional formatting when we make changes. So let me do it here, but the process will be the same. So with this cell, I can go ahead and say Control-1 to format the cell. Then for the custom format that I want to apply, I want, in case the change is positive, I want a triangle that is, pointing upwards. If it is negative, I should be pointing downwards, and it should be red. So in that case, we do custom format. I will go ahead and type the format here where it says type. Okay. And then let me delete what is there currently. I'll just retain the 0.0%. These are simply placeholders. Unfortunately, I can't zoom here, but basically what I want to say, the first part of the number is how positive numbers will be formatted. And we are saying it needs to be 0.00. If you want a positive sign before it, you can say plus, okay, if it is positive. And then if you want maybe the ones which are negative, you can put the semicolon so that you move to the negative side. You say minus 0.0. When I say 0.0 with a percentage sign, then it basically means one decimal place. If I say okay, you can see nothing changed because we haven't updated the color. So if I press Control-1 again, for this minus again, we can put, the color is usually put in square brackets. I put the word red just before the minus, after the semicolon. You can see now it converts that to a red. So if I don't want to see the minus, I simply again, Control-1, come back to the formatting, and I remove. And I say, okay, so it will not be shown there. So let me go ahead and do the one that we want at the end of the day. So I want a triangle that is red. So I want it to come after I specify the red. So I can use the window key with the dot or the period on the keyboard. It's the way you get the emojis and the other shapes. So you can navigate up here you have different options. Let me go to this one, and then I want to use this and this one. Then I can close this part. So when it is red, it needs to point down. So let me remove this one here. And then when it is positive, it needs to be green. So I put that in square brackets and I put my arrow pointing upward. If I say okay, so you can see now the arrow comes. But now it is close to the number. Probably I want it to shift towards the left side of the cell. So I need to put a space in between. I go back to the formatting. After the triangle, I will put an asterisk and press the space bar once. Basically what that means is that the character that comes after the asterisk, in this case a space, will be repeated as many times just to fill up the cell. So I'll do the same even with the green part. I put an asterisk after the triangle and press the space bar once. If I press OK, you can see the triangle moves to the left. Let me just copy this part for your sake so that you can see what I have. So that's what I was typing. So you can see the positive part. Then after the semicolon, that's when you choose how do you want to define. How do you want to define the negatives? Okay, so this one will change automatically. So I can therefore copy this cell. If I press Ctrl C to copy and I go to the dashboard, I want to paste it here, but I can't simply paste. I want to paste it as a mirrored image. So I come to paste from the home tab. There's the paste button. The last one on the last line here, the last one on the right side, it says linked picture or picture link. That's the one we want. So if I click that one, it will take, and I can position it where I want. I could resize it here if need be. Okay. But in the formula bar, you can see it simply takes just like we did before. Okay, so this one is called a camera or a picture link. It's an image of the other side, such that if I click August, the number will keep changing. Okay, so you can see this one is green because compared to March 2023, there is a change. You have a bigger number in 2024, so it's green, but it's too shouting. You can't even read. I don't know whether you can read from your side. So you'll come back to the calculation and edit this cell that has the green color. So we usually don't use green because it's a bit shouty. We use, I will remove and I type color. Color without a U. Color 10 is the color code for green. No space. Color 10. So you see now this one is eye friendly. So that's how it looks like, color 10 in square brackets. Okay, so that gives us the color code, and you see here now it's easy for you to read. I will do the text boxes to just simply allow me to add from the shapes text box. So this one will be just the text cells. Again, I don't want it to be formatted. So this one you just simply type. Shape format, no outline, no fill. So that is cells. I can hold Shift, Control, and drag to duplicate. Okay, or Control D if you like. So the second one will be LY for last year. If you want to type it in full, that's okay. Or prior year, last year. And then the change. Okay, so we have the numbers there. They are all dynamic. They are changing as you select anything here. Okay, so it allows you to navigate and play around with the numbers. Okay, and this one is the actual. This is for the currently selected month. You can resize as need be. Okay, so let's add another one that will tell us this is the current current month, and it will be up here. Okay, I will not work on the alignment for now, but yeah, you get the point. You got the point. So that will be the current month, and then we shall have a similar one for YTD. You can put it somewhere on the right side. In the interest of time, allow me to leave that one for you to explore. It will be the same process. You already have the numbers here. Please, we shall share this one for you to explore and follow along. Now, the next thing I wanted us to create is a bar chart that will give us the breakdown per brand, okay? Per brand, and this one should not be filtered by the brand slicer. So I'll come to insert tab again. I can go ahead from data model existing. I'm creating a new pivot table, and then I want the sales. Okay, you can see usually pivot tables resize as you keep adding things, and that can mess up your dashboard. So I'll go ahead and right click the initial pivot table and apply pivot table options. I don't want it to resize, so I'll choose this one, out of fit column width. I remove that one. Let me do it with this one again. And since I don't want to repeat that process, I'm gonna copy paste this one. I'll make this one my base. So I'll copy and simply paste it below it. We discussed this one last time, so it will be fixed now. So I want this one to be broken down by brand. So I put brand in the rows. So this is what we want. And then I want this one to show as a bar chart. So I'll go to insert tab. This is the bar chart we are talking about. There you go. And then because it's a pivot table, it will come with a lot of junk for you to clean up. Let me first cut and paste it on the dashboard. I want just a small image that will fit inside this grayish button or box that we created. So let me work on this one. First, we want to remove the gray buttons. Right click and choose hide all field buttons. You're right clicking any of the gray buttons on the chart. Hide them. We don't want the legend on the right. I simply delete. I want the numbers here to show. So I'll right click and choose add data labels. There you go. Therefore, I don't need this axis on the bottom. I right click and choose delete. And this is what we get. Now it makes sense for me to sort these numbers so that it's able, like there's no reason this bar should be bigger and yet it's the second one. So I need to come back here, right click and choose sort values from smallest to largest. Usually the chart does the opposite. So from smallest to largest. And you can therefore resize it and then continue to format it as need be. Okay. So it will give us the placeholder for the chart. You can play around with these numbers so that you see they are too huge and therefore they are not appearing as you'd expect. They are not appearing. See 931, 35, maybe we should apply some bit of formatting. So if I right click this and I choose to format data series, actually not data series, but data labels. On the right side here, you can choose. Now this is about formatting the charts. Again, you can put a custom format for it. So you type the format code. I want if the number is greater than 1 million. So I start with a square bracket and I say greater than or equals to 1 with 6 zeros. Then I want that, close the square bracket. I put 2 semicolons, okay, so that it will show in millions. A semicolon, not semicolon, sorry, a comma usually instructs Excel to divide the number by 1,000. 2 commas therefore means by 1 million, 3 will mean billion, and then trillion will be the next set of commas. And then I want this one to appear with a hash. maybe comma, hash, 0.0. Hash and zeros are placeholders. When we say 0, it means we are forcing the number to show. If the number was 0, ultimately, like in this case, if we say 931.0, the million is 931. If we round off to the next million, it will be 931.0. But if we say .hash, it means that .0 will not show. So 0 forces the number to show, hash does not. If I click add, okay, it doesn't appear as we expect. I think we needed the commas, the two commas to come after, sorry for that, after the .0. So we need the two commas, and then we click add. Okay, so the two commas to divide by 1,000 or a million come after the syntax or the code, and then we want it to show after the two commas. Maybe you want a letter M, like that. General means, yeah, like that. You see 932.0 because we said persist the 0. Okay, so this will be our chart, which does not need probably the title because we can already tell what it is. And you can apply the formatting as need be so that it fits this region where you have the chart. Okay. And then you apply, maybe you don't want the fill color. You can choose for the chart, right click, format chart area down here. And then you choose no fill so that it will blend with what you already have there. And you can go ahead and remove the borderline as well. So I'm showing you for the current, but it will be the same process in case you want to show for the YTD. Next, we wanted, let me again show you the screen. So this is what we are trying to follow through. Okay, so we've done the upper part, but we haven't done the YTD. So we want to do the lower section. Okay, so let me go ahead and start with the straightforward one, the regions and the channel performance. And these ones are taking the YTD. So I come back to this pivot table. I want to copy this original one. And then probably paste it here. I don't want it to use sales. I want it to use the YTD sales. And then I want the channel like that. Again, right click and sort smallest to largest. And again, just like before, we had this lesson where we can convert these ones to percentages. Right click, show values as percentage of grand total or parent column total. Okay, percentage of column total or percentage of grand total will work. So it will give us that. And you can right click number format and apply the decimals, maybe to 0 or 1 if you like. It depends. I should add up to 100%. Again, you can do a chart. This is what we are going after. Cut, paste it here. Okay, so that's the drill. So we can format it again. Right click, hide field buttons everywhere. Remove these legends, the same stuff. Add data labels. Then delete what you have here. We again said this is channel performance. When you're working with charts, and after this, I know there is a gift for those who will stay towards the end if you want to learn a lot of this formatting of charts. And you can change the colors if you need to, but for now, let me not go with that. But if you look at this one, if I select March or April, this chart does not change. If I change to Molfit, it doesn't change as well. And therefore, we need to apply the connection to this particular pivot table. And you need to know what pivot table it is. If you go to the Analyze tab, Pivot Table Analyze, on the left side, it's Pivot Table 4. You can give them names, but for this case, I need to right click the brand, choose report connections, and then here it will give you all the pivots that you have here. So you tick the one that you want. And do the same with this month's report connections. And then again, choose pivot table forms. Again, for the year, it's the same thing. So that one has the filter applied. So now if I select March, it will change. So this one will give me the YTD. And these ones, the chart titles, you can make them dynamic to respond to what is in the slices. But this one is YTD until March. Okay. Channel performance. So since I want the same behavior with the brand, region, I can copy paste this one now because the formatting has been applied. But now on this second one, we simply show field list instead of channel. I want the region. Okay, and of course you can always sort these things the way you want. And this one, we want a donut chart or a pie chart if you like. This is the donut, this is the pie chart. Let me go with the donut. Again, you can go ahead and right click, choose add data labels. Okay, format as need be, hide all field buttons. For this legend, if you right click and format legend, you choose to show them on top. And the title here can be YTD regional performance. Again, Control X, paste it where you want it to appear. Okay, so it will appear somewhere, and you can resize so that you fit within your screen. I think it's trying to process something. I have moved very fast. Okay, so this will be the chart that you get. For the data labels, you can, let me try to resize some of these things. Okay, so these data labels on the donut, if you right click, you can format them. Okay, right click, format data labels, you will see the options on the right side. It says it needs to show a leader line, which is fine, but you can also move them to the right side like that. You drag one by one so that the leader lines will appear. They don't appear by default, but that's how you get them to show on the chart. So the leader lines are these small lines that point to the number. So we have that regional performance. Now we had another one that needed us to create the top 5 resellers. Okay, so let's go ahead and create probably the same thing. I copy this one because it has the filters applied. Okay, so I want to change this one to show by the pre-sellers. There's a column called pre-sellers. Again, it's the same drill, but here we want to show not just the YTD percentage. We want to see, actually, we don't want to show as a percentage. So let me right click, show values as, and I say no calculation. So you have that. You have that. So there are about how many pre-sellers here? Let me see. About 22. So we want the top 5. So we can go ahead and choose this filter button next to the row labels here. And maybe before we even do that, if I go to design tab, I can change this report layout to be tabular so that it gives me the name there on the header. Then on the filter button, I choose value filters. This is where you get the top 10. So in this case, we want top 5. And it's by sales YTD, top 5 items by YTD. If you want bottom 5, it's the same process. So let me not go into that. I don't want grand totals for this one. So I go to design tab, I put them off. And this table here, I wanted it to show sales as well as the growth. So I want to show the percentage growth, okay, for YTD. It looks like this one, there were no sales for the same period last year. So, and you can go ahead and rename here as need be. Okay. And again, you can apply the conditional formatting here for these ones. If I go to Home tab and then conditional formatting, you can choose whether you want up, down arrows under icon sets, maybe the triangles or rectangles. You can go ahead and choose that. You get an icon here that shows you formatting options. And this one allows you to update so that this pivot table is dynamic. You see, by default, it says on selected cells. That's why it will apply the formatting. But in case you have a longer list, you want it to apply on all cells showing year-on-year percent, as well as where you have a pre-seller, so that if the list grows longer, you don't have to come and update that the selection only contained 5 rows. So you choose that one. Okay. Now you can put the other numbers here if you like. For this one, you can again apply conditional formatting. I don't want to go into that, but finally, you can copy this table. Again, Control C, move it to the dashboard. Maybe we want to put it somewhere below these others. Again, we don't just simply paste. We go to the Home tab, paste, and do a picture link. So anything that you do on this, it will always update. And as you can see, if I click Feb, see the numbers update on that. Okay, if I choose Pompous, they update accordingly. And that's the basis of doing a dashboard. Now, what else is remaining? In the next 6 or so minutes, I think I wanted to show you how you can then limit a line chart to show the last 12 months. Okay, and then we'll call it a wrap. So if I come, it's taking time to respond. It's usually sometimes a bit heavy. So I'll copy this initial, or I can go ahead. I know this one has a filter on the year. I want to first create a pivot that doesn't have that. I go to insert a plain one that doesn't have a filter. Okay. Sorry, I clicked the wrong one. It's supposed to be data model. I'm wondering why it's behaving like that. So from the calendar, I want to pick the year. I put it in the rows. I put the month again in the rows. And then for the sales, I want the actual sales. I want to see the trend over time. Okay, so this is how it's been trending. And again, this one, you can go ahead and apply the formatting as need be. It's a tabular. We don't need the totals for this one. We don't need. Then right click, table options, and then out of it, column widths. We don't need those ones. And we press OK. So with this chart, with this table, it gives us how many months. This is 20 of them, but I want the last 12 months. So I want to go back to Power Pivot window and apply a logic that will give me the last 12 months filter, because I want it to be dynamic. So if I open the Power Pivot window and I go to the calendar, I want to create a new column on the right side here. I want to call it last L12M, in short, last 12 months. And then the logic in the formula bar will be maybe the maximum date. And for those of you who would want to work with variables, you can go ahead and use variables here. So it will be, let me see if I recall, it's a variable. So I'm pressing Shift Enter to move to the next line. So the variable starts with a var. Variable will be the maximum date, and this one will be the maximum of the period column in our sales table. So I want to first identify what is the maximum date that I have in my sales table, so that I know the maximum I should go to. Then I want to return. I hope this one works. What I'm returning is that I want to compare the calendar date. And I say this one should be greater than or equals to. Okay, I needed another variable that will give me 12 months prior. So the mean date in this case will be year month, gives me the end of month from a given date, the end of month from the maximum date. I want to go back 12 months, so I say minus 12. And since I want to start, if the maximum date is August 2024, then it should start from September last year, right? So I need to start one day after it gives me the max, the minimum, the 12 months date. Okay, so it needs to be, sorry, I clicked outside before I could finish. The calendar date, which is this column here with dates, needs to be greater than the minimum date, and it also needs to be less than or equals to the maximum date. So it will just simply mark this one, and we can introduce an if statement. So we'll say if that condition is met, then we'll classify this as last 12 months, else other. You can just call it other to keep it brief. So when we enter, you'll get any date that falls within the period. Last 12 months will be classified as last 12 months. And therefore, if I close this window and go back to my pivot table, I simply need to apply that column here in the filters box. You can drag it on the right side, filters box, and choose from this filter. We just want to retain last 12 months, and we say okay. And just like that, we have 12 months of data. And this one will be dynamic. In case we add September, then it will start September backwards until October. And this one will be our last chart that we create. Insert a line chart out of that. So that is the trend. And this will be placed somewhere here. You can go ahead and use the same logic to get the year-on-year change. Okay, right click, hide all field buttons. We don't want the legend. Then we want this one to be last 12 months trend. Okay, a marathon of some sort. So this chart will not be filtered by the year because it's a bit static. It shouldn't be changing based on the year. It's automatic in the sense that the starting point and the ending point will always adjust. And that's what we want to test now before we take your questions. Before we take, and I see actually there's a question on that. How do you manage automatic data refreshes to ensure the dashboard is always up to date? So, as you've seen, the last date here is 2024 August. Now, that's because the table that we used is this one that had data up to August. So I want to point this report to this other file that runs up to the last month is October here. Okay, so that we see if these two will come to be part of the data. Okay, so let me close this file because it will complain if it's not closed. Now to update the data, you go to the data tab. In this case, since I'm using a different file, I need to point to that particular file. So from get data, you see the option that says data source settings. Simply because I'm pointing to a new file, but that has a similar structure. I could have renamed the new file to take the same name. I simply click refresh. But in this case, I take this one. This is the one for 2024. Change source. and then I browse and take this one, which is having September and October. If I click import and press OK, close, I can come to the data tab and let's see what will happen. So we expect, at least on these last 12 months of data, to show up to October 2024, but start from November 2023. So if I click refresh all and cross your fingers, it did. And I think you can see the chart itself is now October 2024. I didn't have to rework anything. Okay. And yes, there we are. So in the interest of time, I think I've covered most of the things that I needed to cover. But finally, if I go to the view tab, these grid lines you see here on this worksheet, they make the worksheet look a bit busy. So I want to remove them by going to view tab and check grid lines. So it's a bit plain as such. So the rest is just tidying up and, aligning what needs to be aligned. We still need to check why this one came as 2. Ideally, it should be 1, the month slicer. It should just have one set of months because we are using the calendar which has the same values. So thank you very much. I think I'll hand it over to you. Let me see if there's any question that I haven't. It was just one, which was about the refresh, which you've just mentioned. And so you can take the floor.
Sorry, number one, that was a marathon and a half. Even personally, I have to rewatch it all over again. But that is well done, well done. And there was a question by Sanish, I don't know whether he's still here. He is asking which version is it where the DAX works in? Is there a version of Excel that DAX doesn't work?
Not exactly. Usually the Power Pivot, which is where the DAX is, was introduced with Excel 2010 upwards as an add-in that you download and install. But with Excel 2013 and onwards, it's already there. You only need to go and enable from File, Options, the same way we did from add-ins. You choose COM add-ins. When you click Go, you should see it there. From 2013 onwards, it's usually there.
Okay. Is there anyone with a question? I think for me, my take for this webinar is the way you easily created a custom function in Power Query. That was that for me was impressive. I've seen videos on how to create custom functions, and sometimes they are a bit difficult. But I like the way you do the interface first, and then you just go to the advanced formula and you create your function.
Sure.
Yeah, that was good. And also, my question is, do you need DAX or you can create all those measures somewhere in your data source? Or do you still need to go and do DAX functions? If you are not familiar with DAX, can you still create those measures with normal Excel functions?
Yes, you can still go ahead and create the measures using normal formulas. You can see the base one was the sum function. But then when it comes to the YTD, it basically means you need to find a way to identify the YTD numbers. In that case, would have probably, if you have a list of months, maybe your data has a month number column 1 for randomly like that, then probably you need to say, if, let me just illustrate here, if this was the month numbers, you'd say if this month number is less than or equals to the month from today's function so that it's dynamic, then in that case, you'll map it as YTD. Otherwise, you put it as other. So in that case, you get a new column that tells you YTD or otherwise. Yes, and then you can filter accordingly.
Okay.
And it will always be dynamic. Yeah.